Who was it again that put this ad out?
It was a campaign called Knock the Vote.
Okay.
They didn't identify themselves particularly.
That was kind of my question, because in some ways it makes the reaction that I had was such anger that I wanted to go out and prove them wrong and by voting. So it just wasn't I was wondering if it was maybe like a strange tactic to get young people to vote, because it's like, look, the old people are voting and these are what they think, so now you have to speak up for yourself and vote. But I agree, it's not good rhetoric, because it's based upon a response of anger. But just wondering about that.
Yeah, I thought that it was an attempt toward reverse psychology and an act of you want to rebel against these statements because you feel like they're not true. But I felt like in this case, ethics was more important than effectiveness.
So I saw this video as well, and I was struck by it. My take was slightly different, though, because it seemed to me that it was actually a piece of political satire, as though the actors, the performers in the video were saying all these things tongue-in-cheek. I'm wondering if you got that sense as well, and if that is the case, whether or not that changes your thinking about it.
I think that the nature of a satire creates, it's meant to be extreme, but when things are posted on Facebook, a large campaign has the responsibility and the ethics to know where these messages are going. And I intend to go into marketing after I graduate. I'm a senior this year. And I know that when you advertise something on Facebook, you can't control who sees it. So while I'm 21 and I know that it's a satire, a person who is 15 or 11 wouldn't know. So ethics still come into play.
Commenting on the 15 or 11, you said you are 21 of voting age and somebody under voting age wouldn't understand. So the targeted audience right now being people that can vote, you don't think it's a good source of or use of rhetoric to target those that do understand it as satire and a call to action?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so you said that whenever you get it on Facebook, you can't control who sees it, and that while you do understand it and you're 21, a 15 or 11-year-old wouldn't understand it. But right now, they're not allowed to vote, they can't vote, and maybe in a few years when they're more mature and they understand things, they will understand this. But as somebody who can vote, you're the target audience, so do you not think it's a good use of rhetoric to have a call to action to you and using this political satire in that way?
I think that while I am a voter, I am not able to speak on the behalf of all voters, so I can speak personally. I found it more, like I said, initially I thought it was extremely to the point, and it was a very effective call to action. But if I thought about it a little bit more, the more I was put off by it. So it causes at least a backlash on my part against their call to action.
Thank you very much, Carol. Before we have what I think will be our last presentation, I wanted to make a remark about that. This is another case, and we saw some on Tuesday, in which the presentation is walking a very fine line. It's edgy in a sense. So one can take that as a satire, which it is at some level. One can also take it as a caricature, which is capable of being received by some people in such a way that they get angry and then they do go out and vote, which I think was the intended reverse psychology. It does tend to divide in some kind of way. So this does, I believe, become an ethical question. People in the United States are fond of pushing the envelope in all kinds of ways. And we have pushed the envelope in political rhetoric and perhaps continue to do so. Some of you may have seen satirical sketches on Saturday Night Live. Some of them are very funny. And they have been directed at both sides of the political aisle over the years. There's no doubt about that. There was one done not too many days ago in which a comedian on Saturday Night Live came on and did a satire about a man who was a Navy SEAL who had served a number of tours of duty and had lost an eye in his service. The satire did not work. It was one that made me personally cringe. Whatever one thinks about the war in Afghanistan or Iraq or politics, to make fun of an individual who had been in service and lost his eye seemed to me to be in bad taste, at the least. So taste is a hard thing to decide, and it is not unrelated to an ethical position. It is not purely subjective. Very often, taste is guided by some kind of moral compass. One of the things that concerns me about recent political rhetoric and political rhetoric at other times in this nation's history and in the history of other nations is that there is not enough caution on the part of people to consider what the effect of certain kinds of rhetoric might be. We have pushed things pretty far. This was an excellent example because it's an example that we obviously, as a group, have something of a different reaction to. And in that regard, I think it puts it on a kind of balance point. And I think that that suggests a degree of reflection and a degree of conversation about this would be helpful. The intention of that posting may indeed have been good in the sense it was intended to get people out to vote, but it did also paint a certain population in a certain light. Satirically so, indeed. Satire is a double-edged sword. There was once an English satirist, Daniel Defoe, who wrote a satire called The Shortest Way with the Dissenters, meaning the religious dissenters. But he did not write the satire with a great deal of craft, and so his aim was completely mistaken, and as a result he was thrown in jail. And then he had to explain what the real aim of the satire was. Satire is sharp, but it can have two edges, and those who use it need to be aware of that, I think. Thank you, though, very much, Carol. Katie, I think you're up.
And as some of you know, I'm from New Mexico, which is a little-known state. And I thought that I'd share with you, just to end, some classic mudslinging rhetoric from the governor's race. This is from the last debate. And ultimately, I think that this is pretty poor rhetoric. I don't think any of it is particularly unethical, just ineffective. Steve Pierce says to Michelle Lujan Grisham, the Democratic candidate, when it comes to, they had been talking about crime and their plans for reducing crime in our state, which is a very serious problem. All of the detailed plans you laid out, my friend, mean nothing when you take pictures with the most notorious gangs in Albuquerque, said Republican gubernatorial candidate Steve Pierce. The Democratic gubernatorial candidate, Michelle Lujan Grisham, fired back, "Steve, shame on you. I take thousands of pictures during my campaign, and like so many New Mexicans, the person you are referring to, I thought, was Johnny Tapia's dad. But you are the candidate that gave a congressional award to a convicted child abuser who is under investigation for using a firearm against a 5-year-old. I thought personally that soon-to-be governor now, Michelle Lujan Grisham's comeback was well-formed, but I thought the initial attack on her taking pictures with gang members was perhaps just not well thought out and grasping at straws, as she accidentally, what happened is just that she accidentally took a photo with someone who turned out to be a fake and a phony father to this famous boxer from New Mexico. So, yep, that is my example of poor rhetoric. I don't think either of these things really have to do very much with crime in New Mexico, which is why I find it particularly unfortunate that the news outlet that posted this chose this as a reflection of statements from both of these candidates.
I was just curious to hear what you thought of her opening line of "shame on you." Do you think that was effective at all?
I do think that was effective. I think it was an appropriate call out, yes.
I think the comment, Katie, I think you made was very good. neither one of them said anything about how they're going to solve the problem of crime in the state of New Mexico. It was almost like a kind of third grade exchange on the playground. There was no substance to it. And it's empty in a sense. And it's also ad hominem because it calls into question motives. She's basically saying, you knew that person was a child abuser.
Which, of course, is ridiculous.
So this is a fairly low level, shall we say. I'm not quite sure it's completely in the gutter, but it's getting down there. It's unfortunate. It's fairly common sometimes in political debate. Things get heated. People get angry. You ever get in a debate with someone and get angry at them? And you're liable to say something that either you regret or you're liable to say something that isn't strictly true. So it's not a bad idea to take a deep breath.
I also just found it particularly unfortunate that the news outlet decided to pick this as, and of course they will, but that, doesn't help
That's right.
voters.
Of course they will. And that brings up the media. The media will always go for things that are more sensational. That's what they will do. No matter what kind of media it is, they will do that because it will draw attention, it will help sell, it will get more viewers. And that's what you have to deal with. And it's yet another reason to be careful. I'm glad you all took the time to get these. Did it help you understand a little bit about the nature of current political rhetoric or how you judge what is effective or not effective? It's an interesting statement that this was effective but not good. That is to say that they thought it might help the individual's cause, but they didn't think it was particularly ethical. There are these difficult decisions that are often made. We all know, and we think it's a cliche, it is a cliche, the end justifies the means. And when you are in a political campaign, what is your primary object? To win. And at a certain point, it becomes very tempting to do just about anything to win, short, we hope, of illegality. But it is tempting. I asked you to read for today Amy Gutman's piece on the lure and the dangers of extremist rhetoric. Did everyone get a chance to look at that? I'm not going to refer to it directly, but if you haven't yet read it, please read it. It's on the website. Gutman used to teach government here. She worked with Dennis Thompson. It's a fairly straightforward piece on the lure and dangers of extremist rhetoric. It was written in 2007. We're 11 years later now, and I think the piece is more pertinent than ever because I think American political rhetoric has become more extreme than it was in 2007. Most commentators would agree with that because they've said so. American political rhetoric has been at an inflection point since 2007, which is increasingly polarized, as the electorate seems to be. It's concerning. It's worrisome. We did look at an example of Senator Joseph McCarthy a while ago, and McCarthy was ushering in an era that we now call the McCarthy era, and that era was characterized by some extreme and polarizing political rhetoric on both sides. There were accusations of people being communists or socialists. There were accusations of people being fascists. It reminded me of a debate on the television when I was a teenager between a writer named Gore Vidal and a writer named William F. Buckley. Buckley was representing a conservative cause, and Gore Vidal was representing a liberal cause, and they had a televised debate. Buckley was an intellectual leader of the conservative movement. Gore Vidal was a very intelligent writer who had progressive views. And for quite a while, they were sitting around in this televised conversation and debate, and they were saying rather cogent, intelligent things about their positions. But at a certain point, things deteriorated. And Gore Vidal blurted out that he thought Mr. Buckley was a crypto-Nazi. Well, when we start talking in that kind of extreme range, then we are out of bounds. And it's very easy to happen. And once you get there, it's not easy to retreat from it, because it then seems that you are retreating. So I want us to look for a second at Margaret Chase Smith's address. This is on page 178 and in our own words. Could you turn to that, please? This is Margaret Chase Smith. Margaret Chase Smith belonged to what party? Yes, she's a Republican. She's a senator from Maine. Margaret Chase Smith is addressing her colleagues. When she begins, Mr. President, whom is she addressing? Yes, the President of the Senate. This is not an address to the President of the United States. It's an address to the President of the Senate. Mr. President, I would like to speak briefly and simply about a serious national condition. It is a national feeling of fear and frustration that could result in national suicide and the end of everything that we Americans hold dear. You may think that is hyperbole, but she meant it. She was very concerned about it. In the next paragraph, the United States Senate has long enjoyed worldwide respect as the greatest deliberative body in the world, but recently that deliberative character has too often been debased to the level of a forum of hate and character assassination, sheltered by the shield of congressional immunity. So you should know that when you are a member of the House of Representatives or of the Senate and you speak on the floor of either of those chambers, you are fundamentally immune from the laws of libel and slander. That is to say, you are able to say, as she explains in the next paragraph, that you are protected in your speech in a way that no one else is. It is ironical that we senators can, in debate in the Senate, directly or indirectly, by any form of words, impute to any American who is not a senator any conduct or motive unworthy or unbecoming an American, and without that non-senator American having any legal redress against us. This is an enormous privilege of an elected official in the Senate to be able to do this. It's extraordinary. Then she goes on to say, yet if we say the same thing in the Senate about our colleagues, we can be stopped on the grounds of being out of order. In other words, you're not supposed to say something of that nature about a colleague, even if they're on the opposite side of the aisle in a different political party. You will be called to account. And there have been some recent instances of that. I think it was not too long ago when Elizabeth Warren was called to account for saying something on the floor of the Senate that was regarded as crossing the line.